And we are live for a new episode of the Electric Pod. Oh, now we are live for an episode of the Electric Podcast. I am Fred Lambert, your host, and I'm joined by Seth Winthrop. How you doing this week, Seth?
I'm good.
All right, you ready for the show? It wasn't that heavy of a news week this week, but there was a kind of a few news pieces that popped off, and especially this one here about Elon Musk donating a lot of Tesla share that kind of shines a better light on the entire situation that came down last year, late last year, when, as you remember, there was the whole Twitter poll about selling 10% of his share that was initiated amongst like a lot of political and media pressure about rich people paying their taxes, and there was a weird talks about like paying taxes on unrealized gains and how the rich have got so much richer during the pandemic while the poorest part of the population has not made any gains. So I mean, all that talk, Elon makes his Twitter poll. It's like, if you guys are voting for it, I'm going to sell 10% of my stakes in Tesla. And then, of course, Twitter says go for it. But
What would have
then,
happened if they didn't vote? Because he had already kind of initiated that, right? He put that
yeah,
into.
well, then what started coming out after that is that, well, I mean, as he was saying that, we are already reporting like, yeah, hey, Elon, you have like billions in stock option to exercise that needs to exercise within the next year. So of course you're gonna have to pay like a lot of taxes in the next year. So yes, you're gonna have to sell some of your shares, which he admitted later on, like on a podcast with Babylon B, that yeah, I mean, I had to do that and everything. But what we learned even before he made this Twitter poll in September, that was in November, so 2 months prior, he already agreed with the Tesla board on the plan for him to sell like billions worth of share in order to exercise those new stock option. So he was getting more shares from Tesla, so his stakes was expanding, but his tax burden was also going to be massive, and he was going to have to sell billions in share to compensate with that. However, to stay somewhat true to the notion that he's going to sell 10% of his stake, he did sell a little bit more than he needed to cover, not just to cover the tax burden, but now at the same time, now what we're hearing is that in late November, so around that time when this was initiated, Elon sold just over 5 million share of Tesla. Not sold, sorry. Well, donated to his charity. So Elon has his own charity that doesn't do that much like charity work in itself. So like it's not like he's gonna like use that money from necessarily for himself, or like to do his own charitable work directly, but he gives money to other foundations through his own foundation, which is a common way that rich people do these things. Um, but what that's going to do too is going to change his tax burden too. For if you donate, you can, depending what kind of donation they are, some of them can be tax deductible. So maybe after all, if you combine that with the s- share that Elon sold, plus the one in that he sold specifically for a tax burden as part of the agreed upon program in September, maybe Elon is actually going to get out of this thing with in 2021 with a lot of like liquidity actually. So that would be interesting to see what he ends up doing with that, on top of what he ends up actually giving the charities too. Because we don't the findings from Tesla didn't disclose, since it's going through his own foundation, we don't know exactly where that money is going, but it's the 5 million shares at the time was worth close to $6 billion. And where that raised an alarm, where it gets interesting, is that right around that time too, Elon was a lot in the headlines because of a comment from the WFP, which is the World Food Program, which is an organization from the UN, and David Beasley from from that organization, the head of that organization, made a comment that only was it what's the percentage of it? Only 2% of Elon Musk wealth could solve world hunger. So it was kind of a comment that he said as part of a release of a plan for the World Food Program, that $6 billion would they put a $6 billion plan basically that would solve world hunger according to them. And you put it in the context that, look, like $6 billion would be like 2% of Elon Musk's wealth, who's the richest man in the world. So that was put in that context, but then of course the media went crazy with it, just clickbaiting it like crazy. And so Elon Musk was like people were asking Elon Musk, like, do it if it's just 2% of your wealth and everything. But then Elon went on Twitter and responded to one of those headlines by saying, if the WFP can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. Which some people took it didn't take it well, that he was like requesting the plan in the thread as if the plan didn't exist, as if it wouldn't work, because he was responding to that through a comment of someone that was like fact checking that $6 billion wouldn't actually work. They don't have a good plan to do it. But the plan was already out there, and Elon like sort of requested it on Twitter, so people were like, hey, he lives on Twitter and whatnot. But to the WFP's credit, they actually did it. They took their plan and broke it down as a Twitter thread. But that was the end of it. Like the news cycle moved on to something else at that point, so it didn't get that much attention. But that all happened during November, and then right after that, we just now this week through the SEC filing, the Tesla file, learned that Elon donated roughly $6 billion worth of share to charity, through his own charity again. But the media has reached out to WFP, and they said that they haven't received any money from Elon yet. So they don't have any money. Doesn't mean that he doesn't intend to give it to them, but apparently hasn't made it to them yet. And then separately, Bloomberg reported that Elon has hired um, a specialist in effective altruism, which is a kind of charity that focuses on giving out money as efficiently as possible. So to try to avoid any traps, like some of the most famous charities have been caught, like giving actually for every dollars that is given to them, something like only 10 cents actually ends up reaching the people in need, or whatever type of charity it is, while most of the money ends up being used for more fundraising for the salaries of the people involved in the charity and whatnot. So in order to avoid things like that and try to uh, be as efficient as possible with the money that's the donation, this movement called effective altruism put some time into any donation to make sure that it's going to be as efficient as possible. So Elon apparently hired some of the people behind this movement to give out that money. So whether it's going to end up with the WFP or not, it's still up in the air at this point. But so that started Elon's week pretty good. Elon donating like $6 billion. Then it went kind of downhill from there, because Elon cannot sustain the appreciation from the public for so long, it looks like. And a bunch of things came out that, again, made this already controversial CEO of Tesla even more controversial. And the biggest thing of more was yesterday with him tweeting this meme of Hitler, comparing Trudeau to Hitler. To be fair,
Yeah.
he took it down fairly quickly, but
I wonder if he took it down or if Twitter took it down.
oh, that's a good question.
Hitler is usually a bad idea. Like if you're just thinking about comedy, it's kind of like the N word of comedy. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Also, the tweet was written within Hitler's perspective, making it sound like Trudeau was just
Worse.
as bad. Yeah, just as bad as Hitler, but even worse, because actually Hitler had the budget, which of course, like, people are hammering Trudeau. And I'm not the biggest fan of Trudeau. Like, I didn't vote for him in Canada, and I think he's like a born and bred politician, like just the average, like, two
He's
face.
Quebecois, isn't he?
He is sort of, but like he spent most of his life outside of Quebec, like
In Ottawa, right?
But I mean, his father was prime minister, so like he had to spend a lot of time in the capital. I think he went to school no, he was a teacher in British Columbia, or he went to school there, but he didn't spend that much time in Quebec. And I mean, I don't care about that. You don't have to spend time in Quebec.
How's
to
his
be a
French?
good. His French is very good, of course.
Okay, good.
Probably better than mine, to be honest. But he speak a more proper French. Well, I'm more
okay.
I'm more of a patois of the people. So, but anyway, it's more about his politics. I think he's like just a hardcore politician that just he promise you something and then delivers whatever he wants to. Like he doesn't really care about not keeping his promises, like most other politicians. For example, like he was elected first time he got elected. He was elected on changing the political system, which in Canada, like you can literally get a majority with like 30% of people voting for you. You can get a majority of seat in the parliament and rule with a majority, which makes no sense. It was talking about let's change the political system here, like have a more modern one that makes more sense, that more people are happy with whoever's the leader in charge. But then he won with that system. So once he was elected and in power, he was like, you know what? It works for me. So why would I change it? And he didn't change it at all. So anyway, but still, comparing to Hitler, I mean, I'm not the most knowledgeable person about World War II, but I feel like Hitler did some things that are a little bit worse than that. But of course, now why people are already kind of mad with Elon is that that his critique of Trudeau is coming out now, most not really about the budget or anything like that Trudeau did in the past, but about his handling of the um,
Truckers.
protest, the freedom protest, the convoy of trucker that's been having a siege on Ottawa for the past few weeks, which they are doing it over some of the COVID restriction, more specifically about the vaccine mandates and at the border specifically, because that has been a problem for the system, especially like U.S. truckers coming into Canada, having to have a vaccine that has disrupted a lot of supply chain. So you would think that, I mean, if Elon had an argument that makes sense, like it would be, oh, like this is destroying your supply chain because you guys are not letting like the flow of supply between Canada and the U.S. probably. But we haven't seen a lot of comments about that. I think it looks like he's more following through, like just and to be fair, like a lot of people are like, he's anti-vaccine. I mean, I'm not saying I'm for the protest in Ottawa, but they're not. They're clearly not anti-vaccine. They're anti the restriction that comes with it, which is hilarious right now because the cases are going down and everyone in Canada is lifting the restriction. Even Quebec, which has been one of the most strict on that front, and now they are sort of like declaring victory, like, hey, we won, but like at the same time the cases are going down. I think like and it has been doing like that for the last 2 years. Like the cases go up, more restriction, the cases go down, and
Right.
cases go up, more restriction, cases go down. So like this is just the cycle we're in, it looks like. But anyway, Elon is he's kind of boxing himself into this problem that we have right now, that okay, if you hold certain beliefs regarding the pandemic or a bunch of other subject, you are part of that team. And if a lot of Tesla fans are not part of that team, so
Definitely not.
he's alienating a big part of the population, which he didn't used to. Like Elon used to be very good at being apolitical. Like he used to
Right.
stay away from that stuff. He used to not say about who he's gonna vote for. Not that I think he said it last time too, though he did hinted at it.
You
That
voted for Kanye, right?
yeah. Yeah, that was another
We should have
screw up in
known
my
at that
opinion.
point
But
that things were going off the rails.
yeah, I mean, because he was serious at first, like he was, and then when someone pointed out like what can you stand for actually for as a presidential candidate, which of course like he stand for publicity, like then it matches the release of an album or whatever. But what he stated he was for, like if his presidential race was actually going through, there was some really not really very well thought out things there. And then when someone pointed out to them, he was like, oh, maybe I should have think about that before. But I think his whole point was like he didn't like either option at the last election, which I think a lot of people were in that boat either way. But it's just a lot of controversies with Elon's that are just adding up on top of each other this week. And one thing that I really didn't like personally, that is like, there was this we talked about last week, the DFEH lawsuit that came out about allegation of systemic racism specifically at Tesla's Fremont factory. So Tesla came out first with their blog post, and they downplayed the whole lawsuit, and then the actual lawsuit came out a day or two later, and it was way worse than Tesla made it seem like. It was way more the description of way more rampant kind of racism, and not just the way Tesla described it, which is like a bunch of production associate calling each other the N word. It was quite not that. It would involve managerial position, it involved HR not being responsive, it involved a lot of like problem within the company itself. And Elon has yet to actually, or had yet to actually comment on it until he sort of did indirectly from a Twitter post here from Earl Frankpoppy, which is an influential person in the Tesla Twitter world that Elon often interacts with on Twitter, that wrote Tesla drawing attention from the CDFEH, whose lawsuit I just mentioned, NHTSA, SEC, and the California DMV, all at the same time because they are upsetting unions, legacy auto, the oil industry, and automotive driving company, and not paying for ads or buying politician. And then Elon agreed with that statement, saying exactly. So basically, agreeing to why this lawsuit happened in the first place, because the FEH is mentioned in there, and then it's like the bunch of recall that happened recently. The SEC that subpoenaed Tesla again over Elon's use of Twitter, and the California DMV thing. I don't really understand, but it's because Tesla is being basically disruptive to these industries by upsetting them, and also not paying ads, which Elon has linked to the media not liking them because they're not paying them, and buying politician that Elon doesn't contribute to political campaign, or at least he doesn't do it anymore. He used to do it a little bit in the past, which I think is very dismissive because I. So, especially for the first one, especially for the DFEH lawsuit, the fact that this is the first time that Elon sort of comment on it, saying that this is only happening because of Tesla being disruptive in the industry, not paying politician or whatever. Like, we're talking about 50 current former Tesla employees corroborating, brain fart, corrob, corroborating,
Corroborating.
corroborating claims of racism at the factory. And again, we won't go into the details. Again, you can watch any previous podcast or read the lawsuit that we posted on Electrek. Like, it is a lot of very serious claims in there. That would be because of those reasons. Like, this is like, I don't like that. And I mean, this kind of conspiracy theory, like that's what it is really, has been going on for a while in the Tesla fan community. Like especially the NHTSA thing, they were like, oh, there's 4 recalls in a row from NHTSA. But if you actually look at the recalls from NHTSA that happened, yeah, it's kind of weird. 4 in a row from in like space of 3 weeks, and I do think that all of them are fixed by over-the-air software updates. So like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. But then if you actually look at the details of each of those recall, like it's not like it's not some kind of conspiracy that they all happened within the 3 weeks. First of all, 2 of them weren't even initiated by NHTSA. One was initiated by a Korean, the Korean equivalent of NHTSA, and then the same problem was just found in Tesla vehicle in the US too. So NHTSA had to issue the same recall. That was for the seatbelt chime. Another one was the heat pump issue, which was a very real issue that people like were experiencing very real problem, and that was also initiated by Transport Canada and then replicated by NHTSA. So again, what's like, it's not even NHTSA like doing here. Like, Tesla admitted there was a real problem, and then they had to do it. I guess you can argue like, oh well, why make it a recall and everything? Well, we explained that when we discussed the lawsuit. It was because of the defrosting. If you cannot have the defrosting of your windshield, it's an actual safety issues, and they had to make a safety recall, all of it. And then we can argue, of course, the one with the rolling stop, the one with the rolling stop, and the one was the boombox thing. Those, I admit, they they are a little bit more up to question, but like, now we're down to 2 weird recall, not 4. So like, okay, so what's the thing here? What's happening really? Um, so I don't know. I don't buy it. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that Tesla has never draw any unwanted attention from the government because of being disruptive, and because of Elon's comment that are a bit controversial and whatnot. For sure, like, I think there's some of it that as doesn't work, but At the same time, I think making it a whole conspiracy and that like kind of dismissing a lot of this real issue, especially like the one with brought up by the DFEH. I think that's not a good idea. That's like the Elon is. I think he's digging himself a bigger, a deeper hole doing that.
Yeah, it's just not a
I don't
good
know if you
look
have a
either.
take on that, Sen.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feels like it's not a good look for him or the Tesla in general to like just deal with this stuff. Some of the stuff is very embarrassing. Some of the stuff is like very
Mm.
legitimate. Uh, so like just tossing it aside and saying it's they're jealous of us or whatever seems a little ugly.
Yeah, it's not. It's just not a good look. Like, and it brings us to the next part here. Um, so one of these initiatives that we just mentioned was the SEC, which is back in the mix here because the Tesla revealed that the subpoena the company again last year, late last year, over Elon's use of Twitter, which is restricted under the settlement that they had with the agency over the way back at the funding secured tweet for when Elon was thinking about bringing Tesla private. Can't believe that this is still a thing. Like we're now what 4 years in, 4 years later, something like that, and
And that price is crazy when you think about the price
yeah,
now. Like
yeah, 420 pre 1 to 5 stock split.
so
So
under
this
100.
is yeah. This is ridiculous at this point. But so now and this is something. So Alex Piro is like kind of a rock star lawyer that works for Elon sometimes, and he sent a letter to the court regarding the SEC's what is described as harassment of Elon and Tesla, and he sent that letter to the court on behalf of Tesla and Elon. And I mean, I read that letter. I'm like, ooh, I don't want to go against that lawyer, like that guy. If you're a fan
He's
of
a
a
bulldog.
well-crafted, yeah, if you're a fan of a well-crafted argument, like go read that letter because that letter just tears the SEC a new one. Because first of all, like he uses as good lawyers do the actual standing where he stand on a legal basis is like he has arguing like, hey, what's happening with the $40 million? Because part of that settlement was not just that Elon resigns from the his post of chairman for a few years. I think now he could actually be chairman again if he get elected. Um, it was also that yeah, there's Tesla monitors Elon's Twitter usage when it involves the release of information that can be material for shareholders, and it involved $20 million fine for Elon, $20 million fine for Tesla, which Elon sort of like indirectly ended up paying for Tesla's part of it too, because Tesla has nothing to do with this whole thing. Elon just tweeted it on his personal account on his way to work, apparently. Um, but Tesla had to pay the $20 million, and then Elon bought $20 million worth of Tesla stock in a private offering in order to compensate for the difference. But of course, and then Elon ended up making hundreds of millions of dollars off of that 20 million. So the guy is laughing his way to the bank anyway. But what Spiro said is that he alleged that the SEC actually never gave back that money to the shareholders as they were supposed to. Years and years later, again, he said that they collected the money. So, like, he's like, "What's happening with that?" So he's seeking an audience with the court regarding the situation. With is him being that, like, "Hey, what's that? Like, we gave that money, like, give it to our shareholders, because otherwise, like, what's happening with that?" And then he used that as an argument that instead of like he didn't say they're using the $40 million to harass Tesla, but they're using the SEC still has that $40 million, and they're using their resources instead of giving money back to the shareholder. They're using those resources to harass Elon and Tesla with continuous investigation that don't lead to anything and subpoenas and whatnot. And they say that they are abusing the settlement that involved the court and Tesla monitoring Elon's use of Twitter to chill Elon's First Amendment right, which is quite quite the statement there. Oh, the letter actually didn't. work here. I'm gonna have to look
Hmm.
into that so that you guys can access it. Because again, it's worth a quick read. And look, I mean, my own opinion of it is like it was back then. I don't think Elon was trying to be misleading with that tweet. Like that's how I use Twitter. Like he just like off the cuff comments like that. And obviously, this one you should have thought more about it because it is material information that you want to sell Tesla and at $420, and of course making it for 20, and then admitting later that it was a joke. The price was actually a joke, but not a joke at the same time because he thought that maybe that's what it was worth back then. Like complete, like not appropriate for sure. Now, was it malicious? Was it worth him being kicked out of this chairman position? Was it worth $40 million fine? Like that's hard to tell. Like it's probably was worth like some kind of uh, tap of the wrist or whatever. But or and maybe that was it was like it's not that big of a deal. Like now we can be chairman again. $40 million is obviously nothing in the grand scale of Tesla and Elon's wealth. So I don't know. But what I do know is that since then, Elon's use of Twitter hasn't really improved. And as we just discussed this week, like you have the CEO of a major company tweeting a Hitler meme. Like, eh, it's starting to not feel very good. Like, and but of course, like that's not even the SEC's job really to like the CEO cannot be crazy on Twitter. Like that's not really their job. I mean, of course, if it's material information to the company, that's another thing. But in the case of the Hitler meme and all the other like wild nonsense that Elon has been posting over the last few years, like that's not really up to the SEC to police that stuff. But it does bring up the larger discussion. It's like at one point is Elon's Twitter use not a positive for Tesla and its mission to accelerate the world's transition to electric transport and clean energy,
I think
and
that
it's a
that ended
detriment.
like a few years ago. Like,
Yeah. I'm late
but
with my question, huh?
right. And it's, the board is pretty friendly to Musk. Like, obviously, his
Yeah.
brother's on the board. He got everybody involved. There's a Murdoch on the board. Uh, there's a bunch of his friends. Robin Denholm, is she still the
The
chairwoman?
chairwoman, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, he obviously is very friendly with her. So uh, I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like the board is going to do anything about it, and that's really the only people who can kind of curtail his tweets unless the SEC gets
Mhm.
involved again. It would be nice. It would be nice if he just like cooled out, by his own on his own. Like, hey, I'm not doing the world any good right now. But you know, I don't see
You
that
don't see that
happening.
happening?
No,
I would think like well, you're right. You're probably right. But
it
it's
would have
interesting
already
to.
happened.
It would have. I don't know. Maybe he just hasn't recognized it yet. I don't
Well,
know
he's
because
surrounding himself with yes people.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I've seen like he's friend for with Joe Rogan, for example,
Hmm.
and you see with the controversy with Joe Rogan in the last few weeks, like there was some positive that came out of those controversy. Like I mean, I haven't looked into the what he did this week just yet. I'm going to because it's relevant to what we do here too. But he had those two different views on climate change, like two expert that have different views on the impact of humans on climate change, which obviously we know like what kind of side we're on here. But I still like I like that. Like he said, okay, there's a problem with me just presenting one side of the view. I'll do like back to back two people when I want to present something that's not mainstream opinion that's controversial. Let's do both side every time. So like that came out of the accusation of misinformation about COVID and also well climate change. I mean, he had a psychologist that he said some things that were kind of dumb about climate change. Also, I'm not sure that was an actual controversies because who's talking to that guy about climate change anyway. Then there was the accusation of racism, which also like came out and like did a whole mea culpa about it and said he changed his opinion about the use of the N word and all that. And that was well received from people. Like I still see a bunch of people who are like, yeah, never never will I ever like Joe Rogan again or whatever. That's fine. That's your own opinion. But like you see a clear, all right, reaction to things and improvements. I would think like maybe Elon is gonna have something like that at some point. But so you think that's not, you don't see that from Elon happening?
Not at this point.
No.
I mean, he's on a roll, like he's he's upsetting. He's getting a lot of attention. I think that's kind of the end game.
Because I think it's interesting on the like the scale basis, because of course people, the argument that like, because Elon always been kind of weird on Twitter, let's be honest, like it's not a new thing, it's been like that for years and years and years, but it used to be like a small percentage of what he says on Twitter was the weird part. Now it feels like it's like 50-50 is him like just stating facts about SpaceX and Tesla, and 50% just some wild meme and controversial opinions and insult sometimes to people, which is
Right.
like you should never insult people on social media. Like that is just
Here's a
like, you
question:
don't say anything that you wouldn't. Yeah.
Do you think Elon would ever say the thing, or do the kind of thing that he did with Biden or Trudeau to China's what do you call it, the chairman? Like, do you think
Yeah.
he would do that? Is he? What's his
I
name?
mean,
Xi?
I don't. I'm not gonna guess. Like, I'm not in his head. But if you look at his history of comments on the U.S. government and the Canadian government and other government, like the German government too, let's say, though
Hmm.
he also been a little bit critical of, but mainly about the bureaucracy of it. Which, I mean, I think every German's also critical of that too.
Right.
Uh, he's been a lot easier on the Chinese government, which has its own significant issues too,
Right.
and also they squeeze in Tesla and some of them, especially regarding the treatment of the Uyghur, um,
Right.
in the northern region where Tesla opened a, though I think like opening it's a like Volkswagen literally had a factory there. Tesla opened a store. There's a bit of difference, but anyway. He's been kind of quiet about that, where like this happens in the US, it would be, I feel like a lot more vocal about it, so that
Yeah. I mean,
I think.
like, not even stuff like that, but even like how the Chinese state media is treating Tesla. Like, there's been a
Mhm.
lot of like really weird stuff, like that's come out of the Chinese state media, where you would think if that came out in the U.S. media, he would have been like, he would have been, all of his yes men here would have been
Yeah.
saying
Well,
things,
but
and
here's the difference. Here he relies on his yes men. In China, Tesla still has a PR department, and they did fight back strongly against the media reaction when the protest at the Shanghai Motor Show happened and all that, and the media started picking that up. Tesla put out like a whole blog post about it, explaining the whole situation, and they fought back. They ended up suing that woman and suing other people,
right,
or at least threatening to sue people that were like bad mouthing them in the media and whatnot. So like there was a clear response there, and it used to be like that in the U.S. too. In Tesla, the PR department, like, the PR department would fight back against misinformation and things like that,
right,
and they would do it. I mean, not perfectly, but they would do it in a much more professional manner than Elon and
right.
his super fans are doing, which is obviously a problem right now. But my point about is, if you go back specifically to the use of Twitter, like Elon has like 70 million people following him on Twitter right now, massive. So is there come a point where like your following becomes so big that you have to shut down completely any kind of negative feedback because it's just too much, and you just have to rely on that, like those people that are yes men and everything, and they're just like
I think
everything you
we've
say
reached
is
that point,
perfect.
because
Yeah.
he, like, if he could take a pulse of like what the general population thinks of
Mm.
what he's saying, I think he would probably feel feel a little bit worse about it, or at least
Mm-hmm.
slow it down, or I don't know. But
But
like,
like you literally, that's a good point, because you literally cannot do that. Like
no,
if he
there's
does it on
too many.
Twitter, it's not gonna work. Obviously, because everyone that's following him is gonna have a hot weighted impact on that poll or whatever. Then you do it in the media. Well, it's fake news media that they're doing it, so it's not true either. So there's
Right.
literally no. place to do that and to get a good pulse of what's happening, other than just being really tapped into this community with uh somewhat objective view of it, which is what we're trying to do here, but obviously we're not perfect at it. um and again, I always admit I'm coming from a bias for Tesla, at least for Tesla's mission at the very least. So it's always something to keep in mind. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't spend too much time on this, but I think it's a fascinating situation that's happening that I would hope can get under control, because I still think the man, I obviously have different views than him on a bunch of things. I think he's the most influential person when it comes to accelerating the advent of electric transport by a wide margin, too. All right. While NHTSA, on top of all the recalls they're doing, they started an investigation into the phantom braking problem that Autopilot users have. And while people are like, I got a bunch of critique for like saying it's an Autopilot phantom braking problem. They're like, yeah, this is a cruise control problem. It's a problem with a traffic-aware cruise control that is an Autopilot feature. So, like, let's calm down about that a bit. So we reported on that back in November. We saw like a giant spike in complaints about phantom braking problems with Tesla vehicles that started to happen. Looks like in May, which would match the switch to vision only autopilot when these switch the neural nets to vision only instead of using the radar too.
Yep.
It started spiking up, this problem with phantom braking, which I experienced on my own car when on my Model
Me too.
3. You too, like there was an increased problem. It's also like there's always been some kind of phantom braking issue. But for people who don't know, phantom braking is when the car brakes or decelerate as if it's expecting a collision or something, but there's nothing to be expected. And for me, like the biggest issues was when I was on the highway passing an on ramp, and even if I was moving left, knowing that there was a car coming or something like that, the car would often decelerate abruptly, like anticipating a car coming from the left, even though I was maybe even if I was on the left lane, coming from the right to the left. And obviously, this is a safety issue if you have a car behind you, and you decelerate too abruptly, you might be rear-handed.
It also
So
sucks. It's like, you
yeah,
know,
like the goal of Autopilot is to alleviate a lot of your
stress.
driving workload so that you can focus on looking at the road and sure. So when you have to not only you have to do that, but then you have to anticipate the potential dangerous behavior like that. It's really not ideal. So we reported on that in November. It didn't. A few media picked it up every now and again, but not too crazy. But the Washington Post, who has obviously a bigger reach than us, they posted a very similar report to ours last month, and that was picked up everywhere in the media. And now it was enough, looks like, to put some pressure on NHTSA that its Office of Defect Investigation confirmed that they opened an investigation into the matter. And also after the Washington Post, so we posted in November, as you see, when the big spike happened, and then the Washington Post posted in January. And apparently, since the Washington Post posted their article, a bunch of people in February started like, hey, well, I have this issue too, and they did the complaint to NHTSA. So that led to NHTSA like most likely opening their investigation. So getting a look into it. The weird thing, though, and I thought, is like looking at their notice of investigation, they say that they are looking into it for 2021, 2022 Model 3, Model Y vehicles. So they are for the vehicles that don't have the radar to start with. But in my experience, this affects also people that have older Model 3 and Model Y with radar. But Tesla basically deactivated the radar when they transitioned to vision only in May of last year. That's my 2 cents on that. So if I
Yeah.
wasn't, it's would broader the scope of my investigation.
I see. Also, the script D isn't working there either.
So there might be an issue with the embedding the script. Those PDF. That's what I used to embed PDF in my post.
All right, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, maybe we should send that to Bradley, see if anything changed on that front. All right.
All right.
Doing some quality check live on the podcast right there.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to Tesla Gigafactory Texas. So we've been reporting over the last few weeks. It looks like production is start. Well, I mean, Tesla actually confirmed last month that they started some build of the Model Y in December, but they nothing to deliver just yet. They need to have regulatory approval for it and everything. But now, what happened this week is that thanks to Snapchat and thanks to some employees that probably shouldn't be doing that, though I don't think they were employees. I think they were mostly the contractors. So they maybe didn't read the full contract, or you're not supposed to literally story your whole day at this like Gigafactory on Snapchat. But thanks to these guys, which I cut out their names from it so that we get in trouble. But we get an actual look inside the factories. We posted the video on our channel. Uh, it's really one of the first look that like you can see actual robots. You can see the production line from a first view perspective of it, and it wasn't really active when from what we see in the video, but it's quite a large production line here. Like, this is not this is commenting on someone else's work at the factory. This is why it's kind of strange thing. A lot of parts of the factory where you see Tesla looks like electrician deploying like new equipment. um
Afternoon nap. That's nice. Little
I
siesta.
don't I don't understand this generation, like how they think that it's okay to like literally Instagram or in this case like Snapchat the same thing, like your whole work day as a worker at a factory. It's I don't know where that kind of thinking comes from, but
Kids these
um
days.
yeah. What else we see in there? Trying to find the good parts. Yeah, it's there, right there. You see the whole production line here. So there's a ton of. I think there's a KUKA robot, a Fanuc, and it looks like maybe like a battery pack production line right there. To be honest, I see like some battery modules at the end. So I think that guy's an electrician or something. Like he keeps working with the electric connection on the ceiling.
We can't zoom in the battery pack thing to see if those are structural.
Oh, they're definitely
For,
structural. Tesla
yeah.
confirmed that. Oh, yeah. I mean, we can discuss that too today. That just came out. Tesla just celebrated its million. And yeah, there's some in the video. You can actually see some Model Ys too, like a bunch of Model Ys here getting prepped after quality control. Like this I think is the camera. You see it very briefly, but where they do the camera check for Autopilot right there.
Ah.
But you see at least a few dozens of vehicle celebrate Black women. Again, Black History Month. This is a lot of video, bunch of tires. There was even a motor too that we see, like this is a motor delivery from Nevada. Like there's a crate with the motor in it. A lot of stuff. But yeah, Tesla just announced that they produced in January their million yen 4680 battery cells from the Kato Road pilot plant in Fremont. So just already confirmed that the first Model Y to be delivered later this quarter are going to be the ones with structural battery packs and 4680 battery cells. So this is good news. But the millionth cell being produced in January doesn't tell us that much. Like let's say like so they have produced like 1,000,000 cells at roughly 1,000 cells per car. That would be about 1,000 car that Tesla can produce with those cells. The most important thing is what is the production rate right now. So is it 100,000 cells, 200,000 cells per week? Like what is it? Because that's really what tells you like what kind of production came out of Tesla. But we got another good indicator this week is that here from Mr. Jeff Roberts, who often flies drones over the construction project, saw a bunch of Model Ys coming out of the factories and being lined up and prepped for what looks like deliveries and more to come. Like it looks like almost like 100 cars there. So this is a significant production coming out of the factory. And yeah, and in Fremont, Tesla doesn't do this with them. They don't put a
Wrap on
cover
them.
on them.
Yeah. I wonder
Yeah,
if it's like the sun or something. I don't know.
Yeah, the sun also, like, this is still a giant construction site, so you don't
Right.
like there's
Dust.
it's easy to raise up dust and have anything kind of ding the car. You don't want that, so it kind of makes sense to have better protection. But all the cars have that, so and if they don't, then it looks like this is putting them on. So yeah, I mean, it still look like the goal is to deliver the cars by the end of the quarter. So within the next few weeks, we should have a good idea. And if you have a Model Y on order with Tesla in the US and you get your VIN, check your VIN because your VIN will tell you if it's coming from Fremont, if it's coming from Gigafactory Texas.
Yeah, particularly if you live in the general area. I'm sure those are probably
Yeah.
going
Or
out
maybe not
first.
even Texas because I think the car might have to go out. If you're in Texas, you're buying
Oh,
this car
that's
in
right.
Texas right now. I still think the car needs to go out of Texas before you can actually get delivery, which is
Which is crazy.
some nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere on the East Coast really would be a lot
Mm,
closer to Texas than
mhm.
California as
Yeah.
well. So basically, anywhere Texas or east.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. The program to open the supercharger network to electric vehicles that are not Tesla vehicles is expanding now to all stations in the Netherlands. So if you've been following this pilot program from Tesla, it started with a few stations in the Netherlands, expanded to a few stations in the Netherlands, France, and Norway, and now this week, open to all the stations in the Netherlands. So this is still a test program, and only like I think um, Dutch, French, Norwegian, German, maybe a few other countries, Tesla owners can use them. But with that alone, and with now all station in the Netherlands, this is going to be a better test for Tesla, which is not just about a few stations, but like how a nationwide network of supercharger can handle the load from Tesla owners and from owners from other EV companies that decide to use a network. So this is going to be a better test from Tesla and a new revenue stream and something that's going to help them expand the supercharger network faster. So all good news. And of course, like so, this is now the new map here. Of course, there's Norway also on top, but you can see Netherlands is well covered by supercharger station, and they can now all be used by any EV that has a CCS connector.
And that can actually park there. Some of them, I think, like the
Yeah, that's a
Taycan,
problem.
I don't know if they can even reach all the way over to the charge port.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I think I saw somebody was parking like perpendicular
don't do
to.
that.
Yeah, don't do that. I mean, I guess you could do it,
Yeah.
and if somebody comes, move it. But
Yeah. Stay there and be ready to move. That's fine, but don't go get a sandwich or something in the meantime because that's not cool.
um,
All right, we have a few more pieces of news to discuss real quick, and then we're gonna jump into the comment section. If you have a question for us or a subject you want us to discuss, please put them in the comment section right now, in all cap or with question in all cap before something like that, just to help us go through them faster. But if you can do that right now in the next few minutes, that would be great because we're gonna get to them in just a few minutes. Toyota at this, last year in December, Toyota had this event about like an update on their BEV plans, and they had these renders of like a bunch of new EVs that are going to come to market in the next few years. Kind of a shift there now, like okay, we're moving away from just our hybrids or plug-in hybrids, hydrogen, and we're going to do actual BEVs, starting with the BZ 4X, the SUV that's coming soon. But just very like those renders like that. That's pretty much it. Some not even prototype. I think probably clay models. But now they did it for Lexus. They unveil a bunch of more Lexus models, or at least more renders, better details of them. And but yeah, I have to be really careful because the way they talk about them, they said these are possible new BEVs coming to market. Like they use the word possible. Even with the range, they said um, acceleration 0-60 could be in the low 2 seconds range, could be, and the cruising distance could exceed 430 miles thanks to the possible use of solid state batteries. So the language is very vague here, but
so written by lawyers.
yeah. So you have this SUV here, bigger full size SUV, a smaller one that is likely going to be based on the BZ4X, but
Like a
with a
crossover.
Lexus version, which is the what LX I think for Lexus. a sedan. The sedan looks very cool. I think the sedan is probably the coolest looking one, other than of course the sports car here, because
Yeah,
there's
that has very some
mhm,
Taycan, Porsche type
yeah.
vibes to it.
Oh, even
Maybe,
smaller. It's a two door too, so
yeah,
it's
it's like Taycan in the front, like
yeah,
something else in the back,
mhm.
959 or something.
Yeah.
Um,
That looks sharp as hell. Yeah.
I feel like Toyota is committed to making the BZ Lexus thing. Like I feel like they said that at some point that they were making three vehicles on that BZ platform: the Subaru, the Toyota one, and then the
Yeah.
Lexus version.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, these comments about the 0 to 60 could be in the range, could exceed, and solid state. That's about the specific sports concept, electric sports concept, right there. Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet looking.
Yeah, I really hope they make these soon.
All right, Redwood had a big announcement this week. They had quite a few announcements over the last few months. Like they got a lot of money. They are investing big on production facility for the cathode material production and a bunch of other things. Throughout all these time, they made these partnership with Volvo and Ford, and now the partnership are turning into actual collection and recycling of end of life battery packs from electric vehicles. So this is a big step into creating an all full closed loop recycling of battery vehicle, which is essential to make battery electric vehicle sustainable, because that's always the case when people are like, hey, what do you do for a living? I write about electric vehicles. Oh yeah, you think that's gonna work? It's like, yeah, oh, yeah, I think that's gonna, it's not a
Might
trend, it's
happen,
gonna, yeah, it's happening. It's like, yeah, but like it's not actually has, it's not as sustainable. Like we're gonna mine all those metals, like this mining is bad and everything. And my argument is always, yes, but when you mine something, you mine those material, unlike gas, which you burn and it goes into the atmosphere and the ocean, you still end up with the same product. Yes, the battery is depleted, but the metal is still there. Instead of going back in the middle of nowhere to mine those, you mine those battery pack again, and you create a closed loop. That is where the sustainability comes from. And they're like, yeah, is that really happening? And then you're like, yes, it's sort of happening at very small scales, because there's not many batteries at the end of life right now, and whatnot. So it's not. But this is the big news here right now, is that they're actually going it. Like, so this partnership with Redwood Materials, which of course, if you don't know, Redwood is started by JB Straubel, co-founder at Tesla and longtime CTO, to partner with Volvo and Ford in their dealership, so that the dealership, when they get an old EV with a battery pack at its end of its life, they do send it to Redwood Material, to their facility in Northern Nevada, to recycle it, and then the Redwood has the processes to collect the metals from those batteries, especially the variable one like nickel, cobalt, manganese, and all that stuff, and then they send that back to Ford, Volvo, or whoever is making their batteries, so that it ends up in brand new cars. So this is great news. This is what we want to see. And they disclosed, Redwood, that they already have the capacity for 6 gigawatt hours per year of battery recycling, or the equivalent of roughly 60,000 EV batteries. Which, I mean, that's already great capacity, because maybe it's even too much for right now, because you don't have that many EVs coming to their end of life every year. But soon enough, there's going to be a lot. Like in the next, within 10 years, you're going to need the capacity for literally like a million, maybe more. And
right?
then in 20 years, you have the capacity for like 20 million per year to recycle. Like this is big business that's happening right now. We need companies like Redwood to get involved. So
And
I'm
they're not
happy.
just taking car batteries; they're taking any kind of
Yeah.
e-bikes
Yeah.
or computers.
Yeah. They're taking everything. But like the batteries from the cars obviously are going to be the biggest, the
Right.
bigger deal here. So we needed like a program in place to take care of that. And this is the first like full one. Of course, some automakers like Tesla already have their home programs to do that, but it's closed loop. We don't have much information about it. So Redwood, I'm really bullish on Redwood. I think it's going to be, especially with the kind of leadership that they have right now
Right.
with JB, and of course, as you can imagine, JB, he went with his former colleague at Tesla that were some of the best, and they're like, hey, if you ever find yourself in need of another challenge, and then quite a few of them joined them at Redwood. So whenever they go public or something, that's going to be an interesting investment opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so we get into the comments.
Yep. Let me just do this real quick. Um, Starting at the top. All right, this was a question from Facebook. How about the chips Tesla uses in their FSD V10.1? Is it made in house? Let's know more about those chips and how they get trained and run in terms of cognition per kilowatt hour. Well, a lot of that stuff is not knowable, but
Well,
um,
so what we mean by made in house? Like, so Tesla, yes, Tesla designed their full self driving chips right now. They don't make it themselves. Tesla is not a silicon manufacturing company, or at least not yet.
no,
I think Samsung, and I think now there's talk with what's the other, the Taiwan, that
TSMC.
TSMC. Yeah, is that Thai or
It's Taiwanese.
Taiwanese? Yeah, Taiwanese.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so they don't produce them themselves, but it's designed in house for sure. And the capacity in them, yeah, you can check. We did report on that, like when they presented the new chip, and that's the biggest advantage for them. Like the processing per power consumption is extremely low. Like anything Tesla does, it's always about the efficiency of power, and the self-driving chip is no exception.
All right, Rivian. What's your view on Rivian? Can they catch up with Tesla?
Well, catch up on what? On production, on overall production capacity? Probably not. I think Tesla is just way too far ahead that catching up is going to be hard. If you mean catching up, I mean on who's going to have the best pickup truck on market right now. Oh, Rivian is already caught up on that. Like they have a better pickup truck on the market than Tesla, because Tesla does not have any. So the like I don't see really like Rivian like about catching up to Tesla. Certainly not again on production volume, but they're gonna be a competitor at some point when they're gonna have a car in the same segments. At that point, it will be interesting to have a side by side comparison. But for now, I think Rivian is just doing great at its own. We're just gonna have to see, because I'm not an alarmist or anything. I think it's just reasonable and healthy to see it that way. That Rivian is gonna have to prove sustainable financial production of their electric vehicles. Like right now, as it is expected, they're gonna be losing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars per quarter. For a while, as they ramp up production and achieve positive gross margin. That's normal. It starts like that. But it's probably a good bet to bet that they're gonna achieve that. But it's still a bet. Like it's not a done deal that they're gonna achieve that. It's an extremely difficult thing to do. I think they're gonna do it, but it's not easy. So until they do that, they're still like things are still up in the air. It took years for Tesla to get there. I think Rivian had a better start for sure. Like it was a lot easier because of Tesla paving the way
Yep.
for them to get there, and for them to raise money. Like once Rivian started production, they probably had, I don't know, 100 times more money in the bank than Tesla had when they started
Right. And
production.
they have Amazon and
Yeah,
other big
Ford.
investors,
Yeah.
Ford. So that's
Yeah.
definitely a benefit for them. I wonder if some like maybe like Dodge or overseas some other company that makes ICE vehicles will say something like, "Take our lines.
Mhm.
let's just make these cars instead of holding up." Although nowhere else buys as many trucks as we do in the U.S.
Mhm.
Um, all right. Regarding Elon's $40 million fine, how many other CEOs get penalized anywhere near that much? It's a good question. I don't think
Yeah.
I can remember offhand any CEO getting fined $40 million for anything.
Any other CEO that use Twitter like Elon does, though? That's the
Right.
other question. Like, yeah, to the SEC's defense, like they are in a new territory for them too. Like, what,
Right.
what's happening here? Like, you're a CEO of $1 trillion company. Well, not at the time, but now, and
No,
you
not at the moment, but
post
yeah.
public, like you publicly release a statement and comments like that. Like it's a hard thing to handle. Like no other CEO will just off the cuff publicly announce to millions of people that they're thinking about selling the company for 420. Like
Yeah. It's kind of like you've got a teenager, like there's a very young child who's running
uh,
a large company, but also has the sensibilities of a child. It's a very
yeah,
interesting dichotomy.
yeah.
All right.
An engineering genius with capacity to anticipate the reaction to his comment of like a teenager. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hey, what did
This
I
Hitler
say?
meme is going to be great.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of laughs. All right. Roller 20 definitely surrounds himself with yes people. He's talking about Elon. You
Mm,
can see that in FSD, refusal to add HUD. That is something I wish Tesla
mm.
would add, or other driving improvements, change to yoke, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
a good point that I've been hammering for a while. Like the bet on FSD now is starting to be detrimental in other side of Tesla's business because some of the designs of the vehicle are clearly some of the designs aspect of the vehicle are designed around Tesla achieving full self driving, which of course is always happening next year. So now that it's when it's not happening, these designs aspects start to look a bit worse. Lack of HUD in a premium vehicle is one of them. Of course, you don't really need that much if it's full self driving. So, like Elon was always the point that you don't need that. The center display in the Model 3 was also behind that. Most people got used to it, and the Model 3 and Model Y have been such great vehicle compared to their offering in the EV market until very recently. That's been improving, but that people just accepted that. But most people are used to an instrument cluster, and it's still a point I think where people are like, "I'm not going to buy a Model 3 because I want an instrument cluster."
hmm.
So you still hear that all the time. So I don't know. The yoke is also part of that. I think like it would make like of course who cares about the steering wheel if you don't need the steering wheel. So, uh, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the dichotomy we talk about. Like,
Mm,
well, you're making theoretically the world's best sports cars, funnest cars to drive,
mm,
but you're also making cars that aren't going to drive, that are going to drive themselves,
mm,
and you're just going to read the paper or go to sleep or something at some point in the
mhm.
future. So you got to like, which are you building? All right. KC5 GTS says, "Oh, do you think of this? Tesla China has a PR department because of Musk's speechification issues. What do you think that means?"
While we were talking about that, we just mentioned it like the way that Tesla handled the whole the way they was portrayed in the media
Oh
for a
yeah,
while last year and the year before that too. The difference being that Tesla and yeah, maybe they know that Elon's persona in China wouldn't go as well.
right. That's probably a good
And
point.
here's the thing, like,
Get ahead of it.
correct me if I'm wrong, but China doesn't have Twitter, right? They don't like they have
They have
Weibo, but
Weibo. Yeah,
and which Elon doesn't really use, or as far as I know, Tesla has a popular Weibo account, but not Elon himself. So
right,
they don't have the same perception that we have of Elon. I think there.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. Good point. All right. Let's some comments here. All right. Next comment. Do we know if Tesla will charge more for non-Teslas on the charging?
Yes, yes, I think
And yes, we
they
do,
confirm.
and they
Yeah,
are.
changes per station. Of course, you have to look in the when you click on it, you can see the charge rate.
Here's something we haven't heard from in a while: Tesla insurance expansion. Last time I heard, it was in Texas, Illinois,
Ohio, Illinois, Ohio. I don't know about
maybe not
Ohio.
Illinois,
I'm not so sure about Ohio.
but not New
Mm.
York, which is the I think second or third or fourth maybe biggest car market. Oh,
Arizona and Ohio, the last two ones. Yeah, that makes 5 states total. But of course, that's 4 states where there's the actual insurance product with the real time driving behavior. California still doesn't have that. So yeah, I mean it's slowly but surely. I think the goal is by the end of the year to have it in most states. End of next year, I think it's Europe and other countries too. So this is the rough timeline, but Tesla is clearly making progress on that front. But apparently, it's super hard to do because it's state by state basis. So the process are different. Of course, the more you do of them, the easier it gets. I would assume. Sorry, but for now, it's 4 or 5 states if you count California with the non-driving behavior product. I would like to have some more numbers on that front, like if Tesla can release. But the way they said it is like it's too new. It's not worth getting numbers, which is probably a fair assessment. But maybe like by the end of the year, if we can have an idea of the take rate in each state, that would be interesting. Because
all
this is
right.
definitely a big business, and Tesla kind of need that business to happen before FSD. Because whenever they are if ever, for some people, they are ready to switch the responsibility from the driver to the system in FSD, they're gonna have to have their own insurance to handle that, because I don't think many insurers are gonna be willing to, or if they are willing, it's not gonna be advantageous to do it price wise.
All right, that's it from the comments.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone that leave us the comment, everyone that's been watching this whole episode. We love you out here at Electrek. And if you did appreciate the episode, I would appreciate a thumbs up on whatever app you're watching. This helps the algorithm a lot, and it's free to do. So please take a second and do it if you did appreciate the show. And if you do too, if you're listening audio only on your podcast app, you can leave us a 5-star review. That helps tremendously the show. And if you can leave a comment at the same time, we read those and we appreciate them. And we're going to see you same